for unim. Paul Adom Otchere me Paul Adom Otchere program bi a patu yenti kakra bi na bi wi a be de chiremu be ma na afide ya to aso yenti Paul Adom Otchere ha.
But if by the doctrine it is meant that even where the authority exercises that power in violation of that constitutional provision, a court has no jurisdiction to interfere because it is the Constitution which allocated that power to that authority, then I emphatically disagree. Okay, we're getting somewhere, isn't it? Justice Ampaw says that where an authority has been given something, they can do it. But if that should mean that even when they are violating the provisions of the Constitution in doing so, then he doesn't see how the Supreme Court cannot interfere. Parliament has been given the power to pass bills. They've been given the power to vote, and they've been given the power to do voice votes and counts and all of that. The Constitution has provided what a quorum means and what voting means. Justice Ampaw, may he rest in peace, says that if that means that they can violate the Constitution, then he disagrees. That Parliament cannot violate the Constitution. That authority cannot violate the Constitution. Let's move on. There's another text in the same case by Justice Akins. He says, the courts cannot justifiably avoid its constitutional responsibility, and it will be palpably wrong to suggest that the court will be usurping the constitutional function of Parliament if the court exercises its original exclusive jurisdiction to interpret and enforce the Constitution, as the Attorney General seems to contend. The fact that such matter involves a political question does not necessarily mean that it cannot be adjudicated upon. I like this one. This is more direct.
But also Paul Otchere me. Paul Asheda. I'm sorry for Paul Adom Otchere. I'm very sorry for him. On Timbrase. Now, if somebody says in some kitty way, echo law school will be feeling. Because Mera, you kind of say a kind of storybook. But surprisingly, no, some seasoned lawyers also got it wrong. Yenti lawyer Maurice Ampaw also, how he also understands what happened in Parliament and at the Supreme Court, and then what happened in Parliament. They all get things wrong. Yenti also no
Supreme Court kasa na waka omutie me mention madie enti the Supreme Court beka no aye final efe so two momentie Ghana you want two important things and the highest in Ghana. One, supremacy. You can say bibi is supreme. Bibi anywhere is supreme. Maybe anywhere is to check the Constitution. In Ghana, no, what be the supremacy of the Constitution, meaning near Constitution in Bekano a final. Senator Christopher can say, at the mention of the name of Jesus Christ, every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus is Lord. Sana so Ghana, at the mention of the name of the 1992 Constitution, every knee, every institution, every power, every authority, every institution, every kingdom, every individual, every be again in bow to the Constitution.
No correct.
It is a supremacy of the Constitution. In their Constitution, become a son. A person sovereignty. You can say almost 2 million women say no. I hear the people. In our Constitution, sovereignty resides in the people. And you nipano Ghana for the 2 million dia. And the 2 million and Parliament. Parliament is not sovereign. And then this idea, Parliament is not sovereign. Parliament and so Parliament and will be also Nipa super idea super or Ghana and Constitution. And the people. Power belongs to the people. And you know, the Constitution kasa no waka. And the Constitution so ama the Supreme Court the power. So one, One, say ebano say ya enforce the right, enforcement of the right, fundamental right of the people. Supreme Court our exclusive jurisdiction when it comes to enforcement of the Constitution. Say ya enforce the Constitution, no, ya make Constitution in the Supreme Court. Two, interpretation say bibi wo Constitution mu na sa de no e say ye chire mu na ye ti ase no. And Supreme Court pay. The Supreme Court has the power to enforce the Constitution and the power to interpret the Constitution.
Yeah, that's it. You fancy why? Why won't say? I would have done. Millicent, what key question? Was it? Is this guy really a lawyer? Also a lawyer. Also sign chairman for laws or law school or chairman for a day. So let's take him like that. Meanwhile, Ralph, of course, you can come with your catapult. Say we cannot contribute at a while. Now what? We are just here quickly. Let's go back to the issue. Parliament. There was separation of powers. To say that Millicent Okano. There were 3 different arms of government, and by convention, the media am the 4th arm of government. But let's stick to the 3. Our constitution, executive, judiciary, and then the legislature. That is what we have. Parliament makes laws. Judiciary interpret the laws. And then the executive, government, and then the ministers and those kind of things. All these 3 arms of government are the outcome of Ghana's constitution. And you will be adio. Nanado is president because the constitution gave him the mandate to be on a ballot box to be voted for to become president. That is the first one. Speaker Babin is at the realms of affairs of parliament because the constitution made a provision say yenya parliament yenya speaker. And the same vein, Chief Justice head the judiciary because the constitution and the creative judiciary is our powers. So all these arms of government obi e na juma. And the Supreme Court say what juma say you interpret the laws now. It does not make you headmaster or headmistress against the others. That is what juma no. And then nobody is saying the Supreme Court ain't need the mandate to interpret the laws. But let me ask you, do you think that the Supreme Court here, did they actually interpret the law? The answer is 100% no. Because as someone can say, I find your markets, they come almost interpret the laws. Not to change they come down, but rather they are telling Parliament, say you cannot do this, so stop it. That is where Ghanaians find fault with the Supreme Court. Say, hey, I find your markets, but say, Article 97, on Tiasie and on no speaker Babin is also saying it wrongly. And Mami Supreme Court only nipa 5 and nipa 4 na kana mon interpreting say Article 97 na kasa dey na kire. Supreme Court says that be no dey interested, but rather than adia parliament ye catch parliament say ye the tabon atoso. And then some of us ye catch the Supreme Court say muni sa jurisdiction muni sa mandate because ye were 3 arms of government and for that matter separation of powers obi e na adwuma. And Ajuma Potting Edema will say, that is what you need to do. Simple as ABC. And the Paul Adom Otchere, NPP form Panifo, Akesie, they are getting it wrong. And as Omasheda, they are not getting it wrong, but Omasheda, including Professor Michael Kwena on Nankasatana Parliament, Eddie Kanshia Samerano, on Nankasako Kranokano, on Sasheda, a cancer for Omasheda, NPP 4. Omasheda. And on yes, Jumano. And for some matter, say what we are saying is Yanka say Supreme Court enim na adwuma ye dabi. But what we are saying is omini sa kwan is omokwa ko speaker Babin ade a wonye because obi a won adwuma oyo e wo Ghana ho. Because as so far as he enim no constitution no am make awo obia nipa miensa na constitution na awo mo ena e kira mo se wo adwumani untimi nkoka se wo adwumani da bere o se ye no wagya se adwuma no ba rather no okwa nipa foforo adwuma akokire na de a wonye dabi it doesn't work like that. And the people who are getting things wrong here no enya parliament o dabi eye mo amu interpret the constitution no in the wrong way no. Yes, Minya Sana. Also, the three arms of government. Also, Obi respecting the Yonko. That is how it is. Untimi interfere into the affairs of anybody. But yesterday, I just brought this up in this show. I'm found Article 122 of Ghana's Constitution. Let me just bring my Constitution here. And person, me can't be Rebecca say, Asma American, American. I don't intend doing that. I will not do that. Intino Constitution that on obi anim nyansa nchen ho nchen obi a. I found free Article 115. I mean some found Article 112. So follow the argument here very, very well. Article 115 of Ghana's Constitution. About your someone made an office of which can be and what can be. There shall be freedom of speech, debate, proceedings in parliament, and that freedom shall not be impeached or questioned in any court or place out of parliament. That is what the Constitution says. Article 115, there shall be freedom of speech, debates, and proceedings in parliament, and that freedom shall not be impeached or questioned in any court. If I underline the word any court or place out of parliament. If I just say, one can't constitution parliament and one court never be some of our people. Hey, I go Article 122, so then go ahead. Lawyer Maurice Ampaw, an act or omission which obstructs or impedes parliament in the performance of its function, or which obstructs or impedes a member or officer of parliament in the discharge of his duties, or affront the dignity of parliament, of which tends either directly or indirectly to produce that result, is contempt of parliament. Kotena nchen baby asa wona we chief justice we ye hon wona ba kire parliament adwuma wonya also contempt of parliament achew Article 122 no. I don't know, Francisca. NPP for IBN say 135 is more powerful than 136. That again, you know. I think Mark is say, well, no, there. So far as he knows, he's a majority leader. Supposed to know any papa there, they one in the Indian friend him. Interfere Mark is telling us, and then there on pay his calculations in 135, SOC 136 in Parliament. We much here. We are winning them.
Hey, I don't know why I belong to that political party.
Ebacho, mesa de mako machibiem. Ebrebia kromfo. Obachi kromfo no beka go to court we ano. E wo question ba ko be na se obisa ho se ana kromfo yo se me ko court die na wo court ho a o se me nko ho. Eze uhu se ne bra enete ho. Enti ebrebia kromfo. Obachi kromfo na o kan ya o se o ko court, o kan ya o se o ko court. E se obisa ho se ki na court die na se ho. Uma de kureshe ho. Na ina surprisingly no. Papa we dey hey. Kana sama. Asanti be dey tu ko. Nka se we wu. Akoka ba bi o so yare odampam, ajimpa odam. Ene ga bi asara Otchere da come for people is telling us say Parliament must by all means avoid a situation of seeming chaos and anarchy Tuesday. I, Gabi, suggest the two leaders and speaker meet before then to agree or agree to disagree on next step. No long to December 7th. Let maturity be our guide and guide. Our guide and guard. Gabi Asarochin, I could say another. He is telling Ghana for say, "Yanko transena, yanko jojo. We can there. Ah. And they to say what they got as go Jojo. Ubi and Jojo on Tuesday. What they for Chief Justice and the for Justice now Gabi and Casao de Qua Lady. Abra. But can't you speak as hey, I can't you say so yeah. Adia is I don't know. We am wa Gabi am wa. I can't you what the post na bre. One and an Asanti be there to more dear check. And there's another Asanti be there to a yare and I want you to know Akoda. And then a Gabi who says I they are no a Jojo post in a dino. Utim fatal for now free we a man for the now campoa. Udimpoa. Lawyer Maurice Ampaw so about Homa Udinimpoa or one him cra. And they won't say they are no casa. I know we now crosses are boundary and carry what their parliament. Speaker and a Chief Justice or Parliament or Speaker so the rights to talk about you before contempt. Near Speaker Beckham and this if I read this on Majatum and your court about Parliament about your parliamentarian what they need to do. And then you will Gabi as I watch the Dakon and a betcha Ghana for Adom Otchere. Gabi, Omerene 7 December Sani Okano. I do where we you are going straight. The post now the NASA who post in an article. In here. And na kaka bense mninya no aba wiye why minia don't worry o the audience nyankopon bo you are not sick you are fit o ho edin pa on sa so timi type utimi twere wano so timi ka ene wanya oka what is Asante be there to aka bi da na Asante be there to what say waka bi akampam ayedin ilem now he is fighting for his life into onkabi into wona wano wa ene onimka ena wano so ena onim kan na won sa wa ena onim twere the Tuesday was a lead in a parliament ho
Ghana must work more efficiently.
John Dramani Mahama, 24-hour economy.
All right, 1 hour with Munufie. Me any William Munufie. I'm gonna say nene da udi can my pacho. You just have to like the show because no. I think it's fun. Anasamebwa. Well, ye charade kakra na afi de ye bin so afa ho. Now when I watched Paul Adom Otchere show no, there were some key points that Paul got it wrong. E pacho yentie nsema Paul kan ni ye. Na yen kire Paul say onyere ne ho na ade a ese oye no onye ne yie. E pacho yen kwani nkotie Paul nsema Paul ekai e ba e de beto so.
What was the 2-4 Attorney General? This was a very controversial matter in which the Supreme Court was invited to have a conversation about something Parliament has done. I'll say it in just one line in a minute. A nomination had been made by the President for the position of Chief Justice in the person of Chief Justice Apalu. Chief Justice Apalu had appeared before the Appointments Committee of Parliament. He had indicated to the Appointments Committee of Parliament that he needn't be there because he was already Chief Justice. You see, it's a bit technical, but we can understand it. The 1979 Constitution came in to replace the military regime of SMCD 2, SMC 1, and all of that. During the military regimes, Parliament was closed down. The military became the executive, but the judiciary was maintained. However, the soldiers never maintained the Supreme Court. So the court structure ends at the Court of Appeal because the responsibility of the Supreme Court is constitutional interpretation. Soldiers didn't want their decrees to be subject to interpretation by the Supreme Court. So when the soldiers come, they close down the Supreme Court. Those people were talking about coup. I don't know whether they've forgotten. Anytime the soldiers come, they close down the Supreme Court. So the highest court is the Court of Appeal. So the Chief Justice is a member of the Court of Appeal. Now, the transitional provisions of the 1979 Constitution said that any judge who was with the Superior Court of Judicature, that means the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court, we call it the Superior Court of Judicature. Any judge who was a judge of the Superior Court of Judicature will continue under the Constitution as a judge as if he was appointed under the Constitution. I'm sure you get that. So if you were a High Court judge, during the coup time, you're a High Court judge. The Constitution comes, you remain a High Court judge as if you were appointed under the Constitution. Chief Justice Apalu was the Chief Justice. He was the Court of Appeal judge and the Chief Justice. And then the Constitution came. So his understanding of the matter was that he remains Chief Justice. He didn't have to be nominated by the President under the Constitution, but the President nominated him. He appeared before Parliament Appointments Committee. He indicated his resistance. The committee said he should be vetted. He was vetted and he failed the vetting. And so somebody took out a writ, Dr. Makutufo of blessed memory, took out a writ to the Supreme Court and said, Mr. Supreme Court, Parliament didn't have the power to vet Chief Justice Ampaw because under the constitutional arrangement, he was already a Chief Justice, and therefore the vetting of Justice Ampaw was unconstitutional. The point was raised by Joe Rind of the Attorney General that, no, you can't say that Parliament is a master of its own procedure. Parliament has vetted him and determined that he's not fit to be Chief Justice. Even if he was Chief Justice already, Parliament has made the decision. Vetting, the appointment committee hearing is a matter for Parliament. The court cannot come in. The Supreme Court said, no, we can come in. If Parliament has been determined to do something that is unconstitutional, then the Supreme Court will come in. So the Supreme Court came in, made a determination that the vetting of Justice Ampaw was unconstitutional, that Justice Ampaw was Chief Justice anyway, and nobody can change that. So that's the first time we heard that. That's the 2-4 story. It's all done, but just to bring you the history, I'm building it up to today, and then we understand where these things are coming from. So that was 2-4 in the Attorney General. Just as a matter of interest, for those of you who like the constitutional history, who were the lawyers in this matter? Okay, there we go. So for the plaintiffs, that is Dr. Amaku Tufo. These were the 3 lawyers that represented Amaku Tufo in 1979 who were urging upon the court that the court cannot, the court can interfere in whatever Parliament is doing so long as it's unconstitutional. They were making the point that Justice Ampaw was already a Chief Justice and the vetting of Justice Ampaw was unconstitutional. The team was led by Nana Akufo-Addo. It included Dr. Edmond Prempeh, who is today a chief in Menchia Palace, and guess what? Chachu Chikata. Time changes, isn't it? This is 1979. I'm sure a lot of you were not born. Okay, I was born, but I was small. So this is the set of lawyers who defended the Constitution and said that the Supreme Court, for the first time, they said the Supreme Court can interfere with Parliament. That the fact that Parliament is a master of its own procedure does not mean that Parliament can breach constitutional matters. It will be interesting to hear what Chachu Chikata says about the ruling of yesterday. Thankfully, all of them are happily with us. Dr. Prempeh is now a chief in Menchia Palace. Nana Akufo-Addo has already spoken about the ruling. Chachu Chikata hasn't. It will be very, very interesting to see what Chachu Chikata says about the ruling, because he it was who went to Supreme Court in 1979 to make the point that the Supreme Court can interfere with Parliament so long as Parliament is doing something unconstitutional. Chachu Chikata said that in 1979 to the Supreme Court. Nana Akufo-Addo said that to the Supreme Court. Today, Nana Akufo-Addo has affirmed that position. We can't ask Dr. Prempeh because he's a chief, okay, unless you go to Menchia Palace to ask him. But Chachu Chikata is around. The journalists should ask him. That's what I talk about all the time. They should ask him that, Mr. Chikata, you made these arguments before the Supreme Court in 1979. Your arguments have been upheld by the Supreme Court yesterday. Justice Jones Doche has upheld your argument, Mr. Chikata. Do you still stand by it, or have you changed your mind? That would be an interesting question for journalists to ask him. But hold on, let's build the story. Okay, so congratulations to the 3 of them. They opened the eyes of the judiciary and the eyes of the law reports to say that, well, the courts can always interfere. Let's move on. Okay. So these were the lawyers for the defendant, that is Attorney General Joe Randolph and Mr. Archibald Lartey Jabate. The 2 of them represented the state, and they were the losing party in the matter. So that's 2-4 an Attorney General. Next came, we had to wait until 1997 for this matter of whether Parliament is a master of its own procedure to be tested again. In 1997, it was a bit more elaborate, and I'll go into it. What was the 1997 matter about? It was about vetting again. Can you imagine? 79 was about vetting. 97 was about vetting as well. It was about vetting. What was the matter? The matter was that the majority NDC in Parliament at the time had been the main party in Parliament in 1992 because the opposition boycotted the Parliament. And then in 1996, the opposition took up the seats in Parliament. They didn't win many. 61 seats were won by the New Patriotic Party, 5 seats were won by the Convention People's Party, and I believe 2 other independent candidates, including the legendary Hawa Yakubu Ogede, may she rest in peace. So 1997, January 1997, the opposition was in Parliament. And then, because NDC had been in Parliament alone in 1992, the vetting was uneventful. Nobody even remembers it. But the Constitution had required the vetting, of course. We remember it because Ekos Pilgabra was disqualified because he was not a registered voter. That's the only thing we remember from the 1992 vetting. Everybody went through. Speculations were arriving in the media that how is vetting going to be now that the opposition NDC, MPP was in Parliament? And there was a lot of difficulty and rancor among the opposition and the government at the time. Rawlings was in full flight, and J.H. Mensah and others were there. So everyone was anticipating what will happen. Okay. In the circumstance, a letter was sent to the Speaker of Parliament announcing the list of ministers. It was decided by the NDC at the time, because they wanted to avoid the MPP people in the vetting committee. It was decided that, look, people who were already ministers in the first term of Rawlings do not need to go through any vetting. It is those who were not ministers who are coming for the first time that needed to go through vetting, because they were trying to avoid the MPP doing the vetting thing. J.H. Mensah, who was minority leader, quickly took out a writ at the Supreme Court, reminding himself of to foreign Attorney General, went to the Supreme Court to say, look, Parliament is going to violate the Constitution. I want the Supreme Court to speak about it. Let's hear the story about that one. So this is the case. J.H. Mensah versus the Attorney General. Let's see what the letters. Now, I want the letters after that. I want the letters, please. Okay, they'll get me the letters quickly, and then we'll deal with it. Yeah. Okay. So, so this is the first letter that was written by J.H. Mensah to the Speaker. J.H. Mensah is minority leader. He wrote to the Speaker. Okay. I hope they have the letter in detail. Is that all we have? Yes. Okay. So this is the letter to the Speaker, and it's signed by J.H. Mensah. These are the details. Okay.
All right. Enti, so utie adea Paul Adom Otchere na. What he was trying to mean is, say, Supreme Court ewo kwan say okochere Parliament adea wanye. But where Paul got everything wrong, and say in all those decisions, you know, Supreme Court made sure say they were rather interpreting the Constitution, because the key in 2-4 verses the Attorney General, and they say Supreme Court says Parliament was doing something against the Constitution illegal, so they just jumped in to do the rightful or the needful, which is to interpret the Constitution properly to Parliament. No problem with that. Do you think that they are Barbie here? No? Was he rather interpreting or saying what is written in the Constitution, or he was rather interpreting it wrongly? And that is the reason why Afenya Markins went to the Supreme Court and said, hey, Court of Law, there is a problem in Parliament. Speaker Babin, actually, I did a Constitution, but me might be no. Mr. Metias Fufro, and Timo Machere, Assembly, Supreme Court was not interested in that. And at some point in Afenya Markins, Nankasa Court, no, Supreme Court wasn't interested in that, but rather no, they were saying something different. And then many Ghanaians are saying, say, the speed at which Supreme Court would convey a questionable kakra. That is something Supreme Court people, you need to think and then understand it. And he said, Medicare can say, President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo again, say, Obetime be Zelensky style ni bi wo Ghana ama Ghana ye nto aba wa sheda de azan kudita bi ba Ghana se na Ghana ye nto aba President Nado you lie ye beto aba opa ye bibia ye beto aba afi we enti President Nado me se na me hu Nado ne se wa sheda odim se Mahmoud ba me ntime we ne enti o sheda mo Supreme Court no afoment trouble in the country na Parliament ya konto kwa na soja fa akọ na soja fa ka se kiki okay sa de abato no ye nto obo aye beto o ye de ye beto NPP for yeah, beto abawe beto
nkwasiafo pa
the campaign amoye no
onu a say campaign no attention
campaign amoye na attention